chilling with Fine Art Africa and Kerry Burns. Today I'm with Zana Masombuka, who I'm so excited to be with. Like, oh my gosh. Her message, her art, what she talks about just inspires me, and I'm almost sad we don't have like 3 hours to just like keep going because we could. But anyway, before I keep going on and on, before we even start, tell us about everything that's happening right now.
Well, I'm Ndebele Superhero. My name is Zana. I'm also known as Ndebele Superhero. The blanket that I'm currently wearing is a Ndebele blanket, as well as some of the pieces on my head, as well as my neck, and the one that I'm wearing, the one that's on my forehead, the blue one is called Mkala, and what I'm wearing on my arm is called Itzila. And these are called amakolite, so the women usually wear them on their thighs and stuff like that, so I thought it would be nice to have them on my head. Like, I made up this look this morning. It's just come from like production weekend, so I didn't really have time to sort out my head. So the blanket that I'm wearing is called Umbalo.
Umbalo.
Yes.
Okay. And that kind of leads into, tell us a little bit about yourself as an artist.
Well, as an artist, like I said, I grew up in a small town called Ndebele, and it's like an area, and particularly in Siabuso, in a small town called Siabuso in Ndebele, and I spent the first 14 years of my life there. And then when I was 14, that's when I moved to Pretoria to go to school and everything. But I would say that my practice started when I was very young. I was raised by my grandmother the first 6 or 7 years of my life, and that's when I actually learned like art, or I was exposed to art. That was my first, but at the time I didn't know it was art. For me, it was more like an extension of existing, an extension of being. And so I went through high school, I did a little bit of drama, dancing, also like I did a lot of sports. I played tennis, I did basketball, I did javelin, long jump, all these. So I was super like involved in my life. And so when I graduated from Stellenbosch, I was studying a BA in International Studies, majoring in Politics and History. During my time of study, I started exploring like conceptual styling, creative direction, and so a lot of people would ask me to come like creatively direct their projects or conceptually style them. And so one of the first projects that I did in my second year got shortlisted for a Sony World Photography Award, and I was like, whoa. What? And so I was like, okay, maybe that was like a fluke.
Yeah.
And then I did it again. I did another project with the first project I did with Cool Delu, and then the second project I did with Shannon Heaver, and that also got like shortlisted for the Sony World Photography Award. And I was like, okay, maybe this is a real thing.
Maybe this is real. I might be good at this.
And so when during my final year of studying, my little brother went to initiation. And during the time, I just decided to just capture this homecoming with a friend of mine. We were using cameras, our cell phones, and just really trying to capture that experience, because the entire process and the euphoria that just fills the space, like my hometown during that time, was like crazy. So we just decided to document his homecoming, and it was just such like an exciting experience for us. And so, and that just started the process of Ndebele Superhero. Ndebele Superhero was meant to be like a series that I do and then I'm done. But then, during that time, it just felt so alive. Like I've never felt so excited and so alive to be a part of something. I felt like I was a part of something that transcends my physical body. And so, I finished school and I moved back to Johannesburg, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Okay, I can do the creative thing on the side. Maybe can also just like content create for companies, or like, trying to make it work. And so my sister and I went to an exhibition, and I wept at the exhibition. So this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be like an artist, if that's the word that you use, but I want to make work and exhibit.
You want to create.
I want to create, and my sister's like, then do it. And I was like, whoa, okay. I guess is what I'm doing, and the rest really. And then I started with some images on my phone when I asked my friends to take them, and then I'd edit them, and then I got one of the images that I'd done with my phone. A friend of mine sent me an open call for the Julie Miller Art Institute.
Yes, yeah.
And literally, like, I applied on the last 2 hours. And I sent my work through that was shot on the cell phone, and they approved me for a show. And I was a part of their winter exhibition.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And so then from there on, I really needed to start thinking about how I want to sort of move as an artist, and I really wanted to do more collaborative based work, where I collaborate with different local African artists for us to really just expand the story, for us to understand also the idea of abundance, that there's enough, that there doesn't have to be one person. You know, if we're able to spread ourselves in different ways and in different spaces, then I feel that by spreading, we're able to create a stronger foundation. And so then it creates like sort of like a springboard, because everyone is sort of sharing what they are good at, and so you take that and you make a final project. So yeah, that's like been my journey and my process as an artist.
I mean, there's so much I admire about what you've just said, and I think there's a couple of things that stand out, but one of the ones that really stands out is the courage to just step forward and do it. Like, to just, I mean, where did you find that in yourself?
My mom, like, she did not like tolerate low self-esteem.
Okay.
Like, growing up, my mom did not. Whenever you'd be in doubt of yourself or of what you represent or whatever, my mom would always be like, I'm great.
Yes.
I think the person who's not great. So if you don't think that you're amazing, if you don't think that your ideas matter, if you don't think that who you are matters, that that you are enough, then we can't even have a conversation. She's like, then you're not my child. Then maybe you're someone else's child. So imagine hearing that. You're like 7. I don't know if she's like, you're my child.
This is not an option.
Yeah, so for her, she really instilled like self-belief in myself and all of my siblings. Yeah. And for us to really just know that we're enough, and whatever we do is enough. So whenever really competition wasn't encouraged growing up, it wasn't something that my family sort of encouraged. Whatever we did, whether it was like a school report or whatever, it was always enough. As long as my mom was always like, you need to do your best. And if you've done your best, then the rest is like, it's fine. The rest is history. So that I have to give that to my mom. She's like super supportive, and she's always just encouraged the whole self-belief, believing in your ideas, believing in the things that you want to see come to fruition.
I mean, and it's just such a demonstration of what can be done when we do just kind of dare to dream in a way, and dare to create. I mean, I think a lot of the time, I think about creativity and what the creative process is, and it comes down to so much of like faith almost in yourself. So we've spoken about that a little bit, and what I wanted to touch on before getting too deep into it is, you, to me, seem to walk this incredible bridge between tradition and family. Like, you talk about your mom, your grandma, this rootedness, and this very solid foundation, and obviously a deep connection with Africa as well. But then studying at Stellenbosch, living in Joburg, traveling, also having this very contemporary global perspective, I think a lot of the time as well. How do you understand the relationship between those two spaces?
I mean, for me, being Ndebele is like a huge part of my identity. A lot of the things that I know because I'm Ndebele. Okay. So even my idea of being black or my idea of being African is through being Ndebele. So that's like the lens upon which I view myself as an African, as a woman, as it's through being Ndebele, because that is what was available to me growing up. So it formed a huge part of my identity. And so through studying, I understood that, like, when I was studying in Stellenbosch and studying history and all these different things, I understood that the next 100 years belong to Africa. And it's just that, like, the natural progression that has been historically proven by historical events. When you look at, for instance, the 7th century, there was a Black Death in Europe, but like China was having its like golden boom, and then you look at the 19th, the 18th century, the beginning of industrialization in Europe, headed by England, Great Britain. So every 100 years belong to a certain continent. I feel like, I don't know what it is, that's sort of what I've concluded. Like, and so through seeing that, and when I was in Stellenbosch, I saw that the next 100 years belong to Africa. And so, having explored like my artistic practice or my artistic side while I was there, I knew the importance, like the the importance of art in society, because each and every great, society in history has always had art and philosophy on its, as the foundational thing. So I believe that right now in this current moment we're at the beginning stages of the African Renaissance, and it's important that African artists understand that, in the conversation that they're having, in the art that we're making, in how we present ourselves. We're really in a very important and a crucial moment, because this sets the foundation and the springboard for the next 100 years for this continent. And so for me, it's being able to also understand that we are evolving beings. We're not frozen in time. We're always changing. And so my art mostly is about reflecting the change that we've undergone, reflecting that culture and tradition is always evolving. It's not meant to stay the same. In order for it to survive, it needs to constantly reflect the people who are living at the time. And through that reflection, then that's how it sort of survives itself and projects itself into the future. So that's sort of my thinking behind it. Having the traveling that I've done has sort of cemented that belief, if anything. What I knew before traveling, I actually, because before I'd speak about it, I'd say, this is happening, and be like, okay, what proof do you have other than like what you've seen online, and so when I travel, it further cemented that yes, this is the proof. The world is moving towards like an African direction. So it's important for us as African artists to position ourselves in that space where we're able to speak on who we are without having to compromise who we are, but to really just be who we are unapologetically, and to also to have our evolution concurrently sort of take place with the evolution of the rest of the world. There is no fault in that, I feel.
Do you think, going into, as you say, we're sort of stepping into what you see as the African Renaissance, what you term as that, do you think African artists, and I'm speaking obviously in huge brushstroke terms, but do you think we're sort of ready for that?
I think that, yes. I think that African artists are ready to have that conversation, because it's like we've been African our whole lives. Yeah. So there is no better time for us to be who we are. Yeah. It's for me personally, it looks like the sort of renaissance that we're going into for my own practice looks like surrendering more to the art itself. I've shared with you that I have a strong belief that the art we make is alive, and it carries its own vibrational frequency. And so for my own personal practice, it looks like surrendering more and listening more and being still and being able to sort of have the art come through and use myself as the vessel. And so for another artist, it looks like something else. And for another, Africans are very multifaceted. So it looks different for each and every one of us, but it is happening. Wherever you are on the continent, you see it. So it looks different for everyone, but ultimately it's all just, we're all aware, I feel, or know that the moment is happening.
Have you ever had a moment where you've created something and you're kind of looking at the outcome of some kind, and the work teaches you something about Africa kind of after it's been created? Is there ever that moment of...
All the time, like I always like plan for like a shoot. I'm like, okay, or like for a project, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do my research, because I'm my background is in research.
Yes.
My academic background is in research, and then I do like research, and I say, okay, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, and it's gonna be great. Get on set, and it's gonna look amazing, but it never like works out. I had to learn that with like one of my first like early project, which was probably South African, is that I had a plan in my head of what was going to happen, and when on the day it was just like, no, babe, that's not what's happening.
Different story, different plan.
So because like my sister and I have a very close relationship. She's super supportive of things that I do, and so I like mid-shoot she was here. She was like just assisting and everything, and she's like, let it go. Whatever's happening, just let it go. And I had, in that moment, it was my first sort of practice of surrendering to the art. And literally the images came out like nothing like we had expected, myself and the photographer, John Malloy. And they were just like amazing. And so I just carried that. And so the learning comes when because as I make the work, I as much as I'm the subject of the work that I make, I don't really say, oh, that's me. I don't really identify with the work so much so that I think it's me in the picture. You know what I mean? I feel like the work lives, and even when I write my treatments, I refer to myself as the subject. That the work is sort of manifesting itself through. So I'm also looking at it almost like a viewer and saying, oh, wow. That happened. Like, because I'm in it. So when you're in it, and then you sort of take a step back, as much as I'm still in it, I can see it and like say, oh wow, and learn something as well from it that I previously didn't know about myself, about the art itself, but about Africa, as you said, and about Ndebele people. So that's usually like how the process goes.
I mean, you've kind of said it, I suppose, in a few different ways, being a vessel for creativity in a way. And I guess that kind of makes me want to ask about, how do you see ownership of art? Like, do you see yourself as the owner of the works that you produce? Who does art belong to?
Art belongs to itself.
Okay.
That's like the most important thing. But we do live in a capitalist society.
Yes.
You can't ignore that.
No.
That's the framework that in the world that we live in, the framework of the art, is to whoever, like, it can belong to the artist or the gallery or whatever the case might be. But I'm an independent artist, so I can't act like I don't see or I don't know about the business of art. I'm very much aware of how art moves, of how it sort of functions in the world, the social setting that we've created for ourselves. And so, for the sake of in the context rather of the society that we live in, art belongs to the artist. In the context, because then the artist is then able to, if you are a buyer or a gallery or whatever, if you buy the work, the artist is then able to then go make more work. So that's what that is. But really, ultimately, in the truth that transcends social constructs, that transcends capitalism, socialism, communism, that transcends all of those isms that we've created into the societies that we function in, I feel that art belongs to itself. Because ultimately it's reflecting everything else, because nature is art. The sky is art. Sunsets look like a work of art. So I feel that art is also a part of that, part of that expression. It's a part of that, of life unfolding on itself. And the medium becomes art. So the medium is, the changing of seasons or sunset or the ocean. But I feel that art it carries the same energy and the same frequency.
So it's a life force.
Almost. Yes. Art is a life force, and life belongs to life.
Exactly.
So art belongs to itself. I feel, but in the context of the society that we live in, I believe that art belongs to it belongs to the artist and how the artist chooses to share it. If the artist says the art belongs to my community, that's then who the art belongs to. But the media that the art comes through in the context of the society that we live in. Okay.
And I kind of want to get into a little bit, I think you were around for Fleas Must Fall. I assume you were around. Okay. I was at Rhodes for Fleas Must Fall, and I'm also a BA kid, worked with Frans Fanon's work, etc., etc. And we talk a lot about the reinvention of Africa, we talk a lot about the liberation of Africa, we talk a lot about the kind of almost reclamation in many ways. So I was sort of wondering, how do you see art's role in that, both kind of economically, as you were talking about, we do live in a capitalist society, but then also symbolically?
I feel that art then, as I've said, it's always at every foundational, any success, I don't even like using the word success, but any sustainable, I'd rather use it to say, any sustainable society prioritizes art. Because art is important in formulating a society. It allows, human beings a space to express themselves and to a certain extent to also like remove themselves from like the judgment in a certain extent, even though art is critically analyzed and judged and all of that. But I feel that art it acts as a way to facilitate conversation, because it doesn't matter where you are, people connect to art, because it's like I said, it's like nature, it's like the flowers, the trees. It carries, for me, I feel that art carries that same frequency. And so when you take people and you put them in a building and you say, let's have a conversation about something, I don't know, let's have a conversation about a class, what is a class or whatever. How they approach the conversation is different from when you take people and you put them in nature. They're more relaxed because the same thing that made the trees and is the same thing that made us. So there's a level of relaxation and openness, and I feel like that art in a building setting creates that an openness of facilitating conversation and really saying, how do we want to move forward as a society? So it acts as a facilitator of conversation without people having their guard up, and feeling like they have to sort of perform a certain personality or whatever the case might be. So I feel like it acts as a way of letting people sort of let their guard down, connect and have conversations about what really matters, what's important to that society or that community.
In some ways, it's almost like art allows us to get behind. It allows us to tap into that kind of emotional, more personal experience, which I think, for me, given the context of South Africa, given where we are politically, obviously it is quite a sensitive time. Everyone's there's a lot of open wounds going on kind of all over the place. And facilitating conversation, in my perception, is the healing remedy. It's the medicine that we kind of need. But art almost allows us to have that conversation, but outside of the academic framework. Which is it feels significant.
Yes, because anyone can engage with art. Anyone, whether the art is in a gallery or the art is,
on Instagram.
It's like anyone, like my little brother can engage with art. My little sister can engage with art. My little brother's not so little anymore, he's like 18. But when he was like 6, he was able to engage with art. And there is no right way to engage with art. Like the same way there is no right way to engage with a tree.
So it gets behind all the jargon, I suppose.
I feel that it is able to really tap into our soul, able to tap into our emotional space. It's able to tap into intuition, and it doesn't matter where you are in society. It doesn't matter if you are like a billionaire or you have nothing. I feel that art acts as a way of facilitating.
It's a unifier.
A facilitating conversation, uniting people in ways that, whether it's music, whether it's prints, painting.
And then just to kind of, one of those sort of final themes I wanted to get into a little bit was what you just said now, the intuition and feeling and emotion. You've got such an interesting creative process. I love it. It like totally reminds me of myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just rock up and then I do things and it just all sort of happens. But it does involve surrender, and it does involve faith, and it does involve channeling. And that connection to the intuitive, which sort of feels connection to the ancient or the mystic. There's something about that. So I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit more on how you interact with that space.
So for me, it starts like, because I'm constantly in a process of decluttering my life and basically like curating my consumption. And what I expose myself to, because I'm an artist and I'm very sensitive to everything. And so because I am an artist, the things that I engage with, the things that I continue to interact with, make their way into the work. So I'm always like, I can't turn it off. People usually say that art lives in me. No, with me, I live inside of it. And so, for instance, sometimes it's like, okay, I want to see like, drink some water, but I could be like, I'd be a color. And then next moment, and I know it when it happens. Like I don't have the English for what's happening to me at that moment, but it could be like I see a color and I'm like, I'm really drawn to that color. I don't know why. And then next it's like a shape. And the next thing, it's a word in a conversation that someone says. And so then all those things, and then it's dreams. And then it's like research, like academic research, where I'm like on ResearchGate or JSTOR or Science Direct, you know. But it's really like it's not linear. It happens like sporadically in different moments. I could be in a meeting and then someone says something, or I see something, and that just imprints. And my brain says note. So I'm always listening, I feel. So then it's in order to be able to hear, because you can listen, but that doesn't mean you can hear what's being communicated. So for me, it's always important to create a space in my life that allows me to hear when it's time to listen. I hope that makes sense. So that's basically like I'm always listening to the vibration. I'm always and not really listening in terms of like hearing, like using my entire body as a sensory tool to listen really deeply and to hear more deeply. So I feel like that's what guides it. If the thing directs me to like an article or a book, I'm always just listening to that. I wake up and say, I need to read that book. I read something and it put me. It's very like intuitive. My process is very intuitive and feeling based and vibrational based and all of that.
I just really appreciate that. I think particularly given that you do have that academic training, but that hasn't stunted your creative process in any way or blocked it. You still trust the intuition.
I mean, when I was studying and when I had to write like a lot of stuff.
It's all the words.
I had to write so much and what I enjoyed more than anything was, for me, it was the research. Because I used that same thing, like even though the work might come out like academic or whatever, but I used the same process, even though then it was like a bit more structured of just, I couldn't like follow a color or follow like a shape or follow a sound, because you have a deadline, you have to submit that history paper or that politics paper or that sociology
It has to be so many words and
so, but I loved research. I loved like just going deep. Sometimes I'd go too deep and I'd be like, okay, maybe this is not what I asked. So it's really like the playfulness when I finished studying, I was able then to do that, to follow a color, to follow a sound, and to just have the freedom to just move around as I wanted. But really, I think when, even prior to like studying in university, I remember when I was like in grade 11, and my history teacher asked us to do a project of like heroes that aren't celebrated. And for me, I went home, because for me it's always like, okay, what does this look like in my culture? Because I had such a rich cultural upbringing. And so I did researches on heroes there, and I was just finding out. And as I was doing research, driving from this person's house to that person, was doing it was like such an exciting experience. And so I think that's when I really fell in love with research, and just seeing something unfold in your mind, and then seeing how that manifests in a physical thing, whether it's a paper, it's an image, or it's a painting, or whatever the case is. So like it's really like, I think outside of that, I just love research.
That's amazing. Like I said, I keep coming back to the way that you have brought these two spaces together, and and how much I admire that the ability to make those two things work in the same space, because it took me a long time to refine flow after moving much more into over structure, over discipline, over planning in a way, and then just kind of falling back into that surrender, allow, move with, as it goes. Other than that, I won't go on for too long, but I do want to say thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this initiative and this movement.
It's going to be brilliant.
It's an exciting time.
It is an exciting time. It's an incredibly exciting time. And soon we will have some of Zana's work, which I'm, again, so excited about. And hopefully we can maybe drag her to Cape Town at some point. We will see. But thank you. And to everyone else, hit subscribe, like, share, do the things. And we'll catch you next time.
Goodbye.